So hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Linda Levan, and I am the Executive Director of Southern Lit Alliance. And I have the fun part of my job is getting to talk about authors. And I am, oh, it's blocking me. Let's see. There we go. From beginning. Okay. So I have this wonderful part of my job. I get to meet all these authors and introduce them and read books. As my job. It's great. So
jealous.
Welcome to Southern Lit Alliance. I want to thank Henderson, Hutchison, and McCullough. They are the presenting sponsor for this series. We call it the Southbound Lecture Series of authors, and we've been having those about every month or so. And so we really want to thank them for their help. I'll also mention we are funded by Arts Build organization here in Chattanooga and also by the Tennessee Arts Commission. So they also are making this event happen for us. So Southern Lit Alliance mission is to provide engaging literary arts experiences to encourage passionate readers and writers. It's fundamental, but it's important. And we feel like more than ever, knowing the benefits of reading, that our world needs books and needs to get off the internet occasionally and skipping through articles and get into the written word. So one of the few of the programs that I'm going to mention is some that we are really well known for. The Southward Literary Feast is we usually have had that every other year, but with COVID, that has not been possible. But we bring in the Fellowship of Southern Writers, an honorary organization that's peer reviewed. They have around 50 members, and they do panel discussions on different topics. They do readings from their new works. We do book signings. We have music. So it's a great festival, and we hope to have it this fall. We're going to do a mini sort of version. We have a few authors willing to come to town. So hopefully there'll be even more, and then we'll do some virtually as well. So look for that. The Young Southern Student Writers Contest has been going on for 22 years. It's for grades K through 12. We have about 4,000 submissions from kids in poetry and prose. And we are fortunate to have professors at University of Tennessee at Chattanooga English department to read every single one. And we give out, normally we have a nice ceremony. Couldn't do that this year, but we will go back to that. We give about 400 medals to kids that had exceptional pieces in their class. And it is just a lot of fun to see what they write. There's some amazing stuff that comes from even third graders. So this is our Southbound Lecture Series, and we do have best-selling and award-winning authors, all kinds of genres, not just Southern literature. So we have about 4 to 6. This year we've done about 8. And we are capping it off with a fundraiser on June 1st. We have Jill McCorkle, her latest book, Hieroglyphics, and she's going to be interviewed by Lee Smith, who's pictured here. So 2 great authors in one, and there's also dinner involved. So get on our website at southernlitalliance.org and check that out. And here's just some other programs that we do. I won't get into details about, but one, the Turn the Page workshop, we have facilitators go in area jails, and they do small groups where they do creative writing, journaling, reading poetry, and it's very impactful. And we are excited to hopefully get back in and do those again. We also have a young adult genre festival, creative writing workshops for teens this summer, do book drives for Moccasin Bend Mental Hospital. So we serve about 7,000 adults and children every year. So our reach is bigger than you would think. So we would really like to thank people who have donated. I had several who registered and then donated to us. So thank you so much. Here's a little information about where that donation will go and how much we appreciate the support so we can continue to do these. So thank you all so much. And now I would like to introduce to you Karen White. Many of you may know her. She is the author of now 29 books, incredible amount of books. New York Times bestseller. You may know her. One of my favorite is the Trad Street series that takes place in Charleston, and just great characters in those books. But she's here tonight to talk about her latest one, The Last Night in London, and we're excited to get that. I finished it yesterday. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Karen. Tell us all about it.
Okay, thanks, Linda, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. So I find that the best way to start these virtual programs is with this PowerPoint presentation that I've created. It's one of my quarantine acquired skills, along with doing puzzles and learning how to make virtual backgrounds. Did y'all notice how great it's London? Get it? It has my website up there and my book. I know, I'm so proud of myself. It hurts. Yes, thank you. So one of my skills is that I have acquired is also I learned how to do PowerPoint, which is really fun for this book because this book had a lot of visual inspirations for me. So I lived in London for 7 years growing up, and that's sort of the genesis for this book. This book, of course, has many, many different seeds, you know, since I lived in London, but that was certainly the beginning of it. So just bear with me for a second as okay, share screen. I can do this. And there's my PowerPoint. Share. Yay, I think I did it. I'm always surprised. Okay. Finally, the book I've been wanting to write for over a decade, and my most personal book yet, a return of favorite characters, a revisit to my home in London, and the marriage of my trademark Southern fiction with historical fiction. I've received many emails from readers asking me whatever happened to Maddie Warner, a beloved character from Falling Home and After the Rain. This is her story, 10 years following After the Rain as a 28-year-old woman with a past she can't let go of and roots as Southern as pecan pie. I filled in the rest of the characters with fan favorite Precious Dubose from All the Ways We Said Goodbye, my collaboration with Lauren Willig and Beatrice Williams, and a random photo I found on Pinterest of this RAF pilot. The RAF pilot spoke to me from this photo. I mean, look at his face. Look at his expression. It was like he was talking to me. And I knew I had to put him in this book. The Last Night in London is like a reunion party for my readers to revisit all they've loved from previous Karen White books and an introduction to brand new characters and a unique setting. I know a lot of readers who have not read those other books think, oh, so this is a sequel. You need to read one of the others. And that is not the case. This is just, again, a revisit. I'm just borrowing characters from other books and sort of showing the origin stories of the characters. So if you enjoy The Last Night in London, you might also enjoy reading those other books because they were so important in the creation of this book. And it was, you know, the second book with Maddie Warner, After the Rain, came out more than 10 years ago. And she's one of those characters that never let go of me. And I was so happy to know that readers also wanted to know more about Maddie Warner. My father's job as an executive with Exxon moved us to London when I was 12. Harley House, built in 1904, was my home for 7 years and plays a central role in both the historic and present-day portions of the book. When I asked the doorman on move-in day why some windows in our flat were plain glass instead of leaded glass, he explained that they had been shattered during the Blitz. It was my first experience with living history, of being in tangible proximity to something so monumental. It was like holding history in my hands. When I became a writer, I knew it was inevitable that I would return to that flat and tell its story as I imagined it. Here are some of Harley House's illustrious residents over the years. The only time I ever skipped school was in the 7th grade to read Gone with the Wind on the roof of Harley House because I was a complete nerd and that's what nerds do. They don't skip school to smoke or, no, I skipped school so I could read a thick book and I didn't want to be interrupted. Apparently, I'm not the only one who found that location inspirational. Yes, that's Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones on the roof in the exact same spot where I read Gone with the Wind. Keith Richards in front of my building, in front of a Bentley or something. And yours truly looking ridiculous and wearing a Walkman. Did I tell you it was the 80s and therefore you cannot judge? That's a huge thing. Do you remember, did anybody else like have a, okay.
I'm from the 80s. I hear you. I had a Walkman.
Yay. I know any millennials are like, huh? Because that was before Discmans, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you might want to avert your eyes for this next one because this is me with a perm. All right. I'm sorry. The Savoy Hotel in the opulent Mayfair section of London was a hotbed of intrigue and political maneuvering during World War II. It was also the scene of my junior prom. The hotel, but luckily not my hairstyle, plays a large part in the last night in London. Yeah, wow. Not a good look, really.
No, I disagree. I think your hair looks really pretty there. I completely disagree. I think you look really pretty.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for that. But okay.
Right.
Okay. The sheer enormity of the Blitz added a very real dramatic backdrop to the historical portion of the story, not just of the devastation of buildings and lives, but also the resiliency of British citizens to never give up in the face of enormous odds. The Blitz was 9 months of almost nightly air raids, including 57 consecutive nights of bombings. Imagine that. 57 consecutive nights of you going to bed and not knowing if you're going to hear the air sirens, and then you do, and then you have to get out of bed and find shelter. I just can't even imagine. The Blitz was 9 months, 43,000 British civilians were killed and 139,000 wounded. I found myself developing a crush on Winston Churchill, whose leadership as prime minister was instrumental in not just keeping Great Britain safe, but also in ultimately defeating the Nazis. So this map here is of London. You can see it's kind of in a circle because in the middle is the center of London. And each one of those red dots shows, it's a cumulative 9-month period, shows where a bomb landed during those 9 months. I mean, that's incredible. It's incredible that the city still stands, truly. Mm-hmm. I met my best friend Claire White in London when we were 16. In the book, young models Ava Harlow and Precious Dubose also meet in London and become like sisters. But war intervenes, testing the bonds of their friendship. Happily, Claire and I are still best friends. And since I married her brother, we are truly sisters. My husband keeps joking that he hasn't forgiven Claire yet for introducing us. But we've been married for 33 years now, so it's a little late. As a freelance journalist, Maddie's assignment is to interview Precious Dubose about her life in London as a fashion model during the Blitz. Recognizing a shared grief, Maddie finds herself drawn to both Precious and to Colin, Precious's enigmatic surrogate nephew. As Maddie gets closer to her, she begins to unravel Precious's haunting past, a story of friendship, betrayal, and the unremembered acts of kindness and of love. As 100-year-old Precious Dubose tells Maddie Warner, some grand gestures and heroic moments never make it into the history books, but that doesn't mean they didn't happen. The last night in London is their untold story. So thank you, Linda Levan and Southern Lit Alliance for hosting me today. And thank you for all you do for readers and writers. I told you it was short and sweet.
Wonderful. We're glad to have you. Well, for those of us who've had a chance to read it, I'm sure we have lots of questions. So feel free to put your question in the chat and I'll be watching for it and ask. But since I'm the one here and interviewing her and the host, I get to ask the first question.
Okay, I'm
So
prepared.
there were such great characters in this book from two time periods, 1939 and 2019, which was really fun. And Precious was just such a wonderful, mysterious character and was this model. And her friend Eva were models before World War II. And I was curious about the couture houses uh, and how you came up with this particular one, Lush Tech, I guess is how you pronounce it.
Or
And if
Lushtak.
it was
Mhm.
that sounds better. Was it modeled after any one particular, or what did you do research about those?
It's really interesting. So Precious was created for All the Ways We Say Goodbye, which was a collaboration. And when we were writing it, Precious is a secondary character and it's 1964. So it's 20 years past the war. So, but in that book, she alludes several times to a mysterious, tragic past in the war. And we never find out what it is. And when we were writing that book, we didn't really think that we would ever know. And then I started writing this book, and I knew I had the contemporary time frame with Maddie Warner, and I knew I wanted the Blitz as a historical framework. So I asked Beatrice and Lauren if I could borrow Precious who was a former model. We know that from that book. So that was sort of a given. So all of a sudden I have this wonderful woman turning 100. She used to be a model. I'm like, okay, so what do I do? So I went online and I just wanted to know, if there was such a thing as models in that, I knew that the couture houses, they had, the girls, the shop girls, and they were, like today's models, but in a much smaller frame. And I found a novel called Clothespins that was written in 1939. And so I read it and I learned so much. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, Precious is going to have a best friend and they're going to be models. And I wanted to create, because in that book they had maybe Czechoslovakian or something owner, these exotic Europeans were coming in with these fashion houses, not just French, in London. And so I've played piano my whole life, and my piano instructor in college was a Russian emigre named Faina Lushtak. I thought,
Wonderful.
what a great name for, a designer, and we could call it Lushtak's House of Fashion. And I need to send her a book because I know she'll get a kick out of it. But yeah, so that's where that name came from. And that's where the whole genesis of Precious and the whole modeling thing. I love how things just kind of fall in my lap and then they become like such a major and, exciting part of the novel.
Yeah, so I found it really interesting. Eva and Precious are involved in the war effort, and they are actually working in the bomb shelters, helping to serve people tea. Got to keep the tea going. And I also found it fascinating how the fashion houses continued, and how women's trousers get introduced, because they're in those shelters and trying to do practical things.
Dresses were not, plus you couldn't, and in the winter, there were no nylons anymore. So you would be cold, and thank goodness for trousers. But it was really interesting because the British government, you'd think they had so many other things to worry about than fashion. And paper was very scarce, but the British government allowed British Vogue to continue printing because they knew they needed to keep up the morale of the women and keep them current with fashion. Like they would, have hints on, how you can tailor last year's skirts until let's make them trousers, or, And because also, if you kept up the morale of the women, then when the men came home or got their letters, it would be I guess a tide rises all ships, so it was a positive thing. So fashion was still very popular. So it's going out and partying in the midst of, bombings, which, that just surprises me. But, I don't know, after living in a year and a half of pandemic, I realize how desperate people get, start to believe, I got to get out of here. But yeah, it was really business as usual. And Winston Churchill encouraged that, that keep calm and carry on thing. People would emerge from a night of bombing. They'd sweep the sidewalks. They'd, drag out the survivors. They'd bury the dead. And then it would be business as usual. They would, if their store had been bombed, they would rescue whatever items they could sell, and they'd have a bomb sale on the sidewalk. I mean, it really was business as usual. And I think because of that, I mean, Hitler thought within 2 days the British would give up, because no way could you take 2 nights of bombings, of just complete obliteration. And they did. They would get up in the morning, just carry on. And so that's why, and after 9 months, the British still hadn't given up. And that's when Hitler just said, never mind, we have to fight the Russians on that front. And thank goodness, because I don't know how much longer, Britain could have survived. And they really were last hope island. Europe had fallen. All of the exiled governments were in London. That's why there was so much espionage and everything. And everybody was looking at Churchill and his government to be that rock that, could not be overcome. And they were because of the just ordinary British citizens.
So we have a question. Were you able to interview anyone who was there during the Blitz? People are still
No,
around.
because, right now, so many of them are gone. There were children, certainly, that are old enough, but and I had planned to go to London to research, and yes, of course, that did not happen. But what is so remarkable about the Blitz is that there are so many written records, personal records, journals. And there was actually and one day I will remember to look this up. There was a government formed organization that had people from all walks of life journaling about their everyday lives during the Blitz. And those are available now online in archives. And there's this scene at the end of the book. It's during one of the bombings, and also in the beginning. And I got all that information from reading. There was one boy, he and his friends went to the roof of a building to watch the bombs come down. And the way he was describing, he was a wonderful writer. And I think at the time he was probably 14 years old, but the way he described it really made you feel it. And that helped me, in writing it as if I had been there. I felt that I had been there because I was, not interviewing him, but reading his words as, right after the events happened. And it was really, really incredible. And how smart, that people thought that in advance, this is historical. This is something we need to keep a record of. So there's a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think particularly interesting in the storyline in 1939 was when it got involved with espionage.
Mm-hmm.
And all the different people there, like you mentioned, from other countries who were interacting with each other and trying to get information, and who everyday people ended up getting involved in this. And did you get that from any of the journals or stories?
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of what was so great, and I mentioned this in the book, that the British National Archives have just opened up, within the last couple of years, information about MI5 and MI6 operatives during the war. And MI5 and MI6, that's basically our CIA and FBI. One's internal, one's external. You know, one is our spies, one is dealing with their spies. And so really, I mean, considering the war ended in 1945, and I think the archives were open in 2017, but they were kept under, you know, under wraps. But it is amazing reading some, when they would be operatives would be like found in just regular walks of life for whatever reason. Maybe they had a good ear for languages. Maybe they knew how to fly. Maybe they were made in a certain house, you know, of sympathizers or whatever, but they were groomed and they would literally be kidnapped and like brought to, you know, a stately home in the countryside and then tested pretty brutally, you know, to see if they were, you know, worthy of being an agent. But, you know, all this cloak and dagger stuff that, you know, James Bond kind of stuff, that stuff was real. I mean, there really were, you know, umbrellas that were also hypodermic needles and, you know, poison rings. I mean, it was insane, but that stuff was real. And there's
the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C.
Yes,
Yeah.
that y'all need to go to that. That's amazing.
Right.
The Spy
So
Museum.
Yeah. Right. That.
Yeah, all of that. Sorry. No, the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., if you can get a chance to go see it. And I'm actually going to New Orleans in June. I'm going to go to the World War II Museum because they have some really cool spy stuff too. But it really was cloak and dagger. It really was. And actually, Ian Fleming, I guess, who created James Bond and also Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, for those of you who don't know, but he was a spy in the war. And so a lot of that stuff, you know, comes from a real fact basis. I'm sure, you know, is dramatized and everything for the books and movies, but there's a lot of truth in that cloak and dagger stuff. And it blew me away. And something also that, since we're all readers here, there are so many fabulous books coming out about the heroes we don't hear about. I know Erica Roebuck had a book out this year called The Invisible Woman about Virginia Hall. I mean, the woman was superwoman. First of all, she was missing a leg. She'd lost it as a teenager. She was from Virginia, riding a horse. She, you know, had to be amputated. She was still parachuting into the French countryside to help the French resistance and, you know, climbing the Alps to, you know, to rescue people. Truly remarkable. And you think that these are the things of movies, and they are, but you know what? These real heroes actually existed. And I'm so thrilled that there's so many of these are coming out now, you know, the everyday heroism of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some really great books on that. I think a big element when the book was, of course, relationships and developing relationships. How do you think the war impacted the relationships? It almost seems like people got close real quick in light of things. And how did that play out in your book?
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, in every war, you know, people would get married. Yeah, a sailor would be home or at, on not on leave, but I guess on leave would just be in some city that he'd never been in before. He'd meet someone and they get married, you know, because it's that instant bond, and you know you might not see them again, and this might be your chance. You need to grab it. Let's get married, you know, and you see a lot of that. So you also saw a lot of pregnant women who, you know, whether they were married or not, but that happens a lot in every war because it is that that element of romance, which is, I mean, war is not romantic, but you know, this young, strong soldier or sailor, going off to fight for our freedom. And my gosh, I love him. I've only known him for a day, but I love him. And it just happens. And like I said, throughout every war, it seems. And in this book, again, because Ava and Graham do not have the chance of time. They don't have the luck of time. They know there's not a lot of time. And especially, and I had to put the statistic in there. I mean, like almost 80% of RAF pilots, didn't survive after a year. And that's why they kept getting younger and younger, because the older experienced ones would die. It was very dangerous. And Ava, they both knew this. And of course, there are reasons why Ava cannot commit, which I don't want to give too much away. But,
don't give it away.
Yeah. but yeah, because because it gives, it's not this, when today, somebody meets someone, you think that you have all the time in the world to get to know this person and find out if this is the person for you. But in war, there's a possible finite time. And it's just human nature that you don't want to miss out. Like if you don't think you have gas in your car, you don't want to miss out, and you want to go to the gas station now and fill up before, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's human nature.
Well, and it seems to be an interesting parallel with Maddie, who thinks she doesn't have much time.
Right.
And learns from Precious so much about life and experiencing life while it's there, and not thinking so much about the future. Tell me about Maddie and how you developed that part, and what your thoughts were behind her story.
Well, you know what? And I think Maddie, because when we first meet Maddie, it's in my book, Falling Home, and she's 14 years old and her mother is dying of breast cancer. And she gets so angry with her mother because she wants her mother to fight harder. And, and I got the inspiration for that character because when I was in 7th grade, a friend of mine in school, Kathleen, her mother was also the mother of like 9 children, and Kathleen was in the middle. But her mother died of cancer in the middle of 7th grade. And I remember Kathleen becoming, the girl whose mother died. And I just remember how, even as a 13-year-old, I just remember, seeing Kathleen and going to the memorial service and just, wondering what it did. Obviously, they're all sad and grieving, but what does it do to you for the rest of your life? Like, how do you respond to that? I know some people, they go through phases like, oh, my mother abandoned me, like, she has a choice. But for Maddie, because of, the kind of breast cancer her mother had was the genetic one. And so she has always believed, her grandmother died of breast cancer, her mother died of breast cancer. And therefore, even though it's 2019, and she knows that there are medical advancements every day, your chance of survival is exponentially longer than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. But she has always lived with that fatalistic attitude that she will die young. That's just who she is. No matter what anybody tries to tell her. And that is why, because she remembers how devastated everybody was, her siblings, her father, her aunt and uncle, everybody was so devastated when her mother, and she just doesn't want to do that to anyone. And so her whole life, that is how she's lived. I'm going to die young, therefore I'm not going to have any long-term commitments. And that's a lifelong ingrained belief, and it takes a lot to get her to see things possibly differently.
She misses out on a lot.
Oh, she does.
With that attitude. Yeah, you can tell she's just she is not living life because she thinks she's dead already.
I know, exactly.
And I know in the grave.
Colin asked her that, you're happy. If you're happy to, to live life that way, then go ahead. And she said, I didn't say it made me happy. And then he says the most obvious thing, then why do you do it? You know, and again, nothing is ever solved with just one person like making you see something. I mean, I like it. So I have done Pilates for almost 20 years now, and I can do the same routine, you know, week after week. And it's only when after a certain point of my trainer telling me a certain thing in a certain way that it clicks for me. And all of a sudden, and it's like, I feel stupid and blind. Like, why didn't I see that 10 years ago? But I think that's, you know, that's how we learn. You know, it can't just be one thing, especially if it's something difficult and complex. You need to chew on it a little bit. You know, you can't put a piece of steak in your mouth and swallow it. You need to chew it for a while.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. So that was great, the friend she has. She's certainly very, I think she wants to leave maybe a legacy behind with writing and establishing herself as doing something important. And this exhibition of clothes during the war and learning about those and writing, she sees a bigger story that she's eager to write about Precious.
Because the story's not going to cry, you know, when she goes. It's, you know, it's not going to be sad, but it'll be part of her legacy. I also love her family. I think, you know, Southern families are amazing. I come from a very large Southern family, and both Falling Home and After the Rain, she's very connected to her, you know, so many siblings, her aunt, uncle, father, and stepmother. And so it was really fun to see her reconnect with her family in this book after pushing them away for so many years.
Even though in England, you never could teach them how to make sweet tea. I thought that was fun.
So many people think that it's just putting sugar in your iced tea. No, don't do that. I know.
It doesn't dissolve.
Yeah.
Great. Does anybody else have questions? I have a lot of comments in the chat about.
Quick question. It's just like you know, so my maiden name is Warner, and where did you get the character or the person, Maddie Warner?
Well, my very good friend and neighbor back in Atlanta, she is from Dothan, Alabama. And her maiden name was Warner, and I needed a good name. So I said, can I use Warner? And she said, yes. So I use friends and family names all the time.
I love it. Well, thank you, Karen White, because that's a cool name. That's my maiden name.
It's a great name. It's a great name.
Great name, right? So that's intriguing to me, and I appreciate that you used it. Woohoo!
Yeah,
Puts more.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
lots of comments about people who've read it, how they love the details in the book and how they learned so much and couldn't put it down. So we encourage everybody to go out to Barnes and Noble, just about our only bookstore in town. We don't have an independent one anymore.
Really?
Yeah, so we're very limited, but go out there and get it and order it. I'm sure it's available online, lots of places. But yeah, we're sad we don't have
Noble is good too.
independent.
They support authors in a great way. So yeah, that's just not that one online store, because
Yeah,
if you want to buy a fly swatter, you can get it from them, but you know, they don't need your book business. So bookstores do. I'm just saying.
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking time with us tonight, Karen. We
And
really
I so
appreciate it.
And I appreciate everybody spending part of your Thursday evening with me. I do appreciate it. And I hope the rest of your year gets better and better, and that you discover tons of fabulous books to read.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
All right, y'all. Have a great evening.
Y'all have a great night, everyone. And